quite like the golden goose that lays the eggs. Petrol and diesel prices are just low-hanging fruit for governments, centre and state. There's VAT, there's excise, there's cess, and all of that gets piled on to petrol and diesel prices at the petrol pump, that is retail prices. Now, through the coronavirus pandemic and the last few months, there have been periods of pause when petrol and diesel retail prices have not been touched. The latest have been a pause between September to November 20th, possibly because of the festive season. But since then, hikes are back with a vengeance. In fact, there have been 6 to 7 consecutive hikes in just the last few days, 16 hikes in the last 3 weeks. And petrol and diesel prices are now poised to hit all-time highs. Now, one understands that governments really are looking for funds when revenues are falling and the economy is really looking in a difficult shape. But is this the best way to stick your hand in the pocket of the common man who is already suffering? Well, before we discuss this, let me go across to my colleague Ajay, who is breaking down the math of every litre of petrol you pay for or diesel you pay for and tells you exactly how much of it goes in taxes.
Well, if you look at the data points in the last couple of years, in fact 2013-14 onwards, when crude oil prices used to be very high, since now there has been a slide of crude oil prices in the international prices. Surely it has rebounded in the last few weeks, but generally from last 5-6 years the prices of crude oil have been coming down. But if you look at the retail price of diesel and petrol, they are hitting life highs. In fact, a lot of people and investors and citizens like us discuss that how come the crude oil prices have actually come down, but retail price of diesel and petrol has not really fallen in the same proportion. The reason for that is that the taxes, which is excise, VAT, dealer commission, that portion of the retail price used to be less than 1/3 a couple of years back. But that proportion has now gone to more than 50%, around 55 or 60%, that range in the last couple of years, which means that the real cost of crude is lesser than the taxes now. So this is important because crude oil price kept on coming down in the international market, but the government kept on increasing the excise. The part of taxes have not really come down, they have actually increased. And that is the reason why you and me still continue to pay record prices for diesel and petrol, because the proportion of taxes is very high. In fact, government, which is cashed out in many ways, did not really pass on the benefit of lower crude oil prices to the citizens, but in other way around held back this benefit and kept on spending a lot of capex in favor of infrastructure projects, subsidies and all the other important expenditure which the government had to do. But the retail citizens on the retail end continue to pay. So perhaps there's a case building, but to what extent it is possible to really trim the excise in these kind of circumstances when already a slowdown in the economy? How much can taxes be rolled back is a question which merits some discussion.
The fact is that taxes are rolled back, or there is some consideration for what people think only when there is a hue and a cry. And this is one segment of consumers who are so wide-based but yet very silent, which is why in some ways governments get away with this. To speak more on this issue, I'm joined today by Madan Sabnavis, who's the Chief Economist at Care Ratings, Saurabh Chandra, who's the former Secretary at the Ministry of Petroleum, and Narendra Taneja, who's an energy expert and also affiliated with the Bharatiya Janata Party. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today on the show. Mr. Taneja, let me begin by getting your take, because this is a complete quote-unquote loot by central and state governments who are desperately searching for funds and are continuously hiking these prices in the hope that people will just quietly pay up because they don't have a choice. Don't you think this is extremely unfair at a time like this when many families are struggling?
Well, Tamanna, I'm speaking here as an independent energy expert and not representing BJP, at least in your show. And, ideas that so that I can be more candid and I can speak, using my expertise on the sector. Now, you said loot. I don't think it's the correct word because it's not loot. Look at the core of the debate that we are having in your show, or we have been having last media has been debating the last 50 years, is basically the tax rationalization, tax reforms, or reducing the government dependence in both the federal government and state government on petroleum sector and natural gas sector for its revenues. No government, whether BJP or Congress or coalitions or United Front or this and that, no government has made a serious attempt to go further to restructure the whole thing. So the situation is what it is today. And now when we are going through a bit of turbulence, we are going through very difficult times in terms of not only India, the whole world, but India in particular, many emerging economies in particular, you don't have too many options. You don't repair the engine or carry out reforms on the changes in the body of an aeroplane when you are at the height of 40,000 feet. So which means that things have to get back to normal first, and then we have to seriously debate. I mean, we have been debating this over the last 50 years, but I think the time is now fast running out. We need to really do it. How to carry out reforms, be part of it, tax rationalization. GST model is already there. What this present BJP government has done is already amended the constitution, which means the GST, actually petroleum and natural gas sector is already part of the GST, but GST council just says to take a decision. But then let's face the reality. Whatever the spokesperson, different political parties may come on your show, other shows and claim and this and that, the fact is no political party is ready, to bring petroleum sector under the GST. Whether you're a national party or a small party, regional party, and so on and so forth. There are many central government dependence on petroleum sector, especially in the context of excise. It's pretty high. It's almost 50%. Look at the state government. The many state governments, for them, petroleum sector is basically the second or the third largest contributor in their revenue basket. And at the same time, they enjoy this comfort. This tax is collected by government of India's companies and passed on to them. So that means the collection cost is almost zero. And at the same time, the money is delivered to the area state governments on time. So this mechanism suits them, works for them very, very well. So I think overall what we need to debate it, and I don't think, and it has nothing to do with my association with BJP, I don't think this is the time actually to go for any. We can debate, of course, but I don't think the government, whether central or state, would be able in a position to very much on that. But the tax reforms, tax rationalization is long overdue. And I think that we need a kind of all-party consensus on this in a sector like this, unless you have that, to change the construct of the way, for instance, federal government and state government depend on petroleum sector. Petroleum sector did fine, was able to contribute to that, but now with petroleum sector, share in energy basket and total energy mix going down, and many challenges to the oil and gas sector, I don't think that petroleum sector would be able to, support the kind of dependence the central and the state government expect from this sector for too long. Let's not forget one thing. Petroleum sector is still crying for reforms. There have been no reforms in the petroleum and natural gas sector. I'm not talking just the pricing. We need overall reform. Our oil companies, most of our oil companies are at least 30 years behind their counterparts in China or in western part of Europe, or even in many emerging economies. Majority of our companies basically are not world class. Majority of our companies need we need to invest in them so that they can be ready. They should be future ready. So that's also a much bigger debate, if you ask me. But I agree with it.
I want to focus. Absolutely. That's a much bigger debate. You're right. That's a much bigger debate. But I want to take away one interesting point you made, and I want to take it to Saurabh Chandra. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. If you look at it from the government point of view, the question would be that in this beleaguered situation, how can we give up such an efficient, source of revenue? But why can't we look at it from the point of view of the Indian citizen, who really cannot take an additional burden right now? During the COVID-19 pandemic, right now we're discussing relief for the common man in so many ways. Bank moratorium is one way of it. Why is this not considered then, Mr. Chandra? Don't you think it's cruel in a sense to continue to pile on taxes on petrol and diesel right now?
Tamanna, governance is the art of the possible. And to be pragmatic, at the moment and in the near future, there aren't too many options for the government to raise taxes through any other means. If GDP is to remain stagnant or decline, it will have an impact on the direct taxes. So the choice is going in for fiscal deficit, which in the long run would mean inflation, which again is an indirect tax on people, or tax them directly. And I would prefer taxing them directly. Having said that, you raised the issue of Mumbai. Mumbai, the VAT is extremely high, and there is scope for cutting down VAT there. The other thing that the oil companies can do is to become transparent about their pricing. Their price build-up starts from the dealer price. Actually, all they have to do is, and that can actually cut out about a couple of rupees, is one, link their refinery transfer price, that is the price which OMCs pay to the refineries, by linking it to export parity prices. Let me point out that all these prices are linked to product prices. Petrol prices are linked to the Singapore petrol prices, and the diesel prices are linked to the Arab Gulf diesel prices. There is scope for some reduction in their marketing margins and marketing costs, but that would make a very small impact. The fact remains that state governments are also benefiting a lot because VAT is actually an ad valorem tax, and it is charged on the excise duty as well as the dealer's commission, plus all other cascading costs that have gone into it. So maybe you can reduce it by a couple of rupees, but beyond that, I don't see the government having the latitude to really cut down their taxes, which at the moment are about 50 rupees per litre.
You know, what I find astonishing is this sense of deja vu. And I mean this in the nicest way, because I've had the opportunity of having this very conversation, I think, with Mr. Taneja and Mr. Chandra earlier in the past in very different times. I've had this conversation, I think, with you, Mr. Taneja, even pre-GST, and GST was supposed to solve everything. We've had this conversation when the markets have been doing well, when crude has been up, when crude has been down, when the Indian economy has been up, when the Indian economy has been down, and the arguments are the very same. They don't change. That it's the easiest for the government, what else can they do? You know, India is the kind of country that needs all of this support. This is the most efficient way. So it just astounds me sometimes. I'm going to come to you, Madan Sabnavis, for a very quick comment on this. And can you, as an economist, also explain to us what the impact is? When we're cribbing about high petrol prices in the city of Mumbai or high diesel prices, it's not, you know, those people with fancy SUVs who are going to feel the pinch. It's a wider spectrum of people. And can you explain to us why that is?
No, actually, Tamanna, today, if you're looking at this entire situation, I think the fiscal reality has actually settled. You know, the first 8 months or so, I think it was more a case of trying to combat the problem of the lockdown and COVID and so on and so forth. And then suddenly one fine day we realized that the fiscal balances are going all right. And that's the reason, I think, why the government has gotten up. And they have had this series of increases in the prices of petrol and diesel. Now, one of the reasons why I think it has been kept out of the GST ambit, personally, I feel, is that it's a very useful source of tax for the government. If you look at both the center and state, they collect around 5.5 lakh crores on an annual basis. So it's a large amount of money. So we're talking of a combined size of budgets of around 65 lakh crores for the center and states put together, and we're getting around 5.5 lakh crores coming just from petrol and diesel. So I think as what you call the golden goose, yes, this is something which is very valuable for the government. And at this particular point of time, we're not in a position to really compromise on it. So I think that's what we're seeing. You keep increasing the prices, the consumption really doesn't come down. In fact, more people are using their own vehicles, so therefore consumption is going to go up, and therefore your revenue is going to increase. But in fact, in terms of the price impact, I think if you look at CPI, for example, it has a direct weight of around 2.5% and indirect of another 2.5%. So even if we're talking in terms of 10% increase in the prices over the last, say, month or so, we're still talking of an inflationary accretion of something like 0.5%. Now, I think all these little bits of pieces of in terms of the
I seem to
WPI,
have
we've seen
lost
it
your
as
audio, Madan.
around
I seem
4.5%.
to have
So I
lost
think,
your audio. I'll come. Yeah, there you are.
yeah. So in terms of the WPI, we
No,
have a
please
weight
go
of
ahead. We lost your audio in the middle. I've got you back on. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the WPI, we have a weight of around 4.5% in the index. So therefore, a 10% increase has a more perceptible impact in terms of inflation. So we're going to live at higher inflation. And we've already seen, if you look at the RBI, they're saying very clearly that growth is important, more important than inflation. So even if inflation is going to remain in the region of 6 to 7%, it's not really going to change the monetary stance. So we're going to continue to have an accommodative policy. So on the whole, I think we as citizens will be paying higher prices. It's probably going to be one of the burdens which are being put on the citizens, because I do expect that when the budget is announced, there are going to be severe measures which are going to be imposed to make sure that the fiscal house comes in order. So I think it only signals that there are going to be tough times for us when the budget comes out next year in February.
You know, the thing with discussing sometimes economic policy is that we tend to get detached from the fact that these are real issues that impact real people, which is why, Mr. Taneja, I appreciate the fact that today you're speaking in your independent capacity. Don't you think that we need to also empathize with the current situation? People are in tough times. Let me take the example of the city of Mumbai, where the trains are shut. The trains have not opened for everyone yet. People still have to go to work to make a living. A lot of them on two-wheelers who need to use petroleum, which is now shot up to 90 rupees a litre. Isn't this a valid issue that should be taken up? There should be someone voicing this instead of just sticking to the old situation that we need larger reforms. You and I have been talking about larger reforms for, like you said, over the last decade.
Well, Tamanna, it's a very, complex debate in the sense here we are talking of 90% versus 10%. 10% people like you and me who buy petrol when the prices go up, since we are both middle class, I mean, of course, we get the hit and we do complain about it. We do talk about it and all that. But the 90% Indians, so most of them using either no petrol or no diesel, or they're just using public transport, or they're using scooties and things like that. They don't really complain very much. Many of them, millions and millions, and I'm not pitching for Bharatiya Janata Party here. I'm very, very happy, very, very proud to be part of it. But here I'm just talking as an independent person. Just think of those millions of people who got almost free LPG cylinder. It's a petroleum product. Petroleum gas, LPG is petroleum product. It's not natural gas. And the same goes for electricity. Many of these, using electricity, which is produced using natural gas or using other fossil fuels, including coal, heavily subsidized. And for a very long time, until very recently, people driving around in big cities like Delhi and Bombay in their Mercedes and BMW or powered by diesel, they were all subsidized by the government for a very long time. It's only 2 years back that things are beginning to look slightly better on that. So I think this debate is very, very, when you look at it from 10% viewpoint, you have a valid point. But when you look at from the large percentage population, 90%,
I would like to,
yes,
I would like to give you a counter argument for that, if you would allow me. So if you would allow me, I don't think it's a 10% debate, Mr. Taneja, because like Mr. Sabnavis also explained, there's a direct impact on inflation. There's a direct impact on the cost of fruits and vegetables because of higher transportation costs. The cost of everything goes up, sir. It's not just those who have to fill petrol in their cars or their scooties or diesel in their vehicles.
Tamanna, your argument was very valid, let's say, until 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But we have seen, with the growing kind of, share of renewable energy and other sources of energy, picture has begun to change. In rural area, they've started more and more solar pump. They've started using electricity. The dependence, for instance, on diesel has gone down. And people have started using also more now fuel-efficient trucks or started using railways, so and so forth. Your argument is still valid, but not as strong as it used to be, let's say, until very recently, only 3 years ago. And the picture is changing very, very fast. That's the reason that political parties, including Congress Party, they've tried their very level best to mobilize public opinion against higher petrol and diesel prices there, but they've failed to get any traction from the ordinary people. So that's what I said. This debate is 90% and 10. 10% they've got a voice, like we are debating. Newspapers often talk about, especially English newspaper, even Hindi newspaper do that. But the point here is that, the 90% people, I wouldn't say they're happy, but they're okay with it because they do get the money that the central government collects or state governments collect. They do get many benefits from it, subsidized foods, subsidized rice or free rice and subsidized fuel and a lot of others. So I think, and in infrastructure and all that. So they look at differently. So politicians at the grassroots level, they go and explain to them, like in Andhra Pradesh, like in Telangana, like in Tamil Nadu, like in Karnataka, or even in Punjab, they go and explain to them, look, it's your money, but that's how we use this money. So I think it's an extremely complex debate. It's not an economic debate. In India, it's more political debate, and where, of course, economics play a very important role. That's probably precisely the reason, despite the best efforts by most political parties, when in the opposition, BJP also tried that, but they don't get any public traction.
That's a very candid, actually, admission. But Madan, I want your take on this 90%, 10% thing. Is it a fact that the common man no longer is impacted by high diesel or petrol prices unless they're driving their own vehicles because of the use of renewable energy or because of other benefits they get in lieu? That is Mr. Taneja's theory. Do you think that there is truth to it? Do you agree with it?
No, actually, I would have a slightly different view because I think the common man is quite discerning. When you get free food, you look at it as saying, okay, this is a particular benefit I've gotten from the government. But I pay higher prices for vegetables and fruits on account of higher transportation costs because you see all your retailers are complaining, saying that the transportation costs have gone up. I know very well that my cost has gone up and I'm paying a higher price. So whether it compensates for one another, that will depend upon household to household. But I think definitely I would not separate the two issues and say that merely because I'm getting certain benefits in the form of a cheaper LPG or free LPG, or I'm getting free food from the government, that it's okay for me. I don't really bother about whether prices of diesel or petrol go up, because at the end of the day, when we talk about the CPI index going up, it affects everybody in an indirect manner. I may not be filling my vehicle, but I would definitely get impacted in an indirect manner, and that also hits. And let's look at it. This is something which hits you cumulatively, something which is not going to get reversed that soon. So I think there will be, it will depend upon each household about what net benefit will be. But to my mind, I think they would probably even out at a certain level, but definitely it still exists. And I think people are quite discerning on it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Sabnavis. It may not become a huge election issue, and opposition parties succeeding or failing on making subjects election issues, I think, is a whole different discussion. But even though petrol, diesel prices don't become the hottest or the biggest election issue, I think they deserve attention because it impacts everyone, and those in governance in state or center across party lines should not beyond a point get the impression that it's a free for all, that no one's going to say anything about it. That's the very least that we can do.
30 seconds.
Only 30, sir. I'm out of time, but only 30 seconds, yes.
No, Tamanna, as I said at my opening remarks, I'm all for reforms. I think it's important. India will pay a very heavy price if we don't go for these taxation reforms and the overall reforms in the petroleum natural. I don't think we have more than 5-6 years. We have to carry out those reforms, including tax rationalization. But what I was trying to basically explain to you, the ground reality and the situation as it is today. Reforms? Absolutely, yes. I'm all for reform. Without reforms, petroleum and natural gas sector is going to face very, very bleak future in years to come.
Okay. No, so that of course is a bigger question, because the whole role of petroleum and gas sector will change over time. But I have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for joining us and hopefully throwing light on the complexities of this very, very crucial issue that we want to highlight today on top of the India development debate.